The views expressed on this podcast are our own and do not constitute legal advice, nor do they constitute an attorney-client relationship. They also don't represent the views of anyone's employers. Hope you enjoy the podcast.
Ready to future-proof your business with data and AI? This is Trust with Dominique Shelton-Leipzig. Conversations about navigating the complex and evolving landscape of data protection, technology, and society. Here's Dominique.
Hi, Sampath. So happy to have you here, and thank you for joining us.
I'm so excited to be here. It's such a great topic, and I just can't wait to dig in.
Looking forward. So just so everyone knows who we have with us, we have an amazing guest on the Trust podcast. Joining me today is Sampath, the Executive Vice President and CEO of the Verizon Consumer Group. A globally recognized leader, Sampath has spearheaded transformative initiatives core to Verizon's industry-leading consumer operating model and customer experience. Under his leadership, AI has become deeply embedded across Verizon's $100 billion consumer business, driving personalization, optimization, and enhanced service capabilities. Sampath, once again, we're so thrilled to have you here.
Awesome.
All right. Well, let's dive in. First, before we go into the nitty gritty, what is exciting you about AI right now? We see so many headlines and there's so much in the news, but if you had to pick, one or two things that really excite you about the space right now, can you share it with the audience?
I think AI, if you look at the last 20, 30 years in America, labor productivity has started slowing down. Overall productivity has started slowing down. And part of that has to do with the offshoring has stopped or has come down a fair bit. And even the benefits we got from technology evolution around Moore's law and things like that have started weighing towards the back half of the last couple of decades. So we don't have anything in our ecosystem today that is going to drive more productivity over the next 2 or 3 decades. I think AI is at the perfect time it has come. It's going to be truly deflationary for the economy, which means it's going to drive productivity and create a lot more opportunity. So that's why I'm more excited. This is a once in a generation thing, and it couldn't have come at a better time, Dominique.
Well, thank you. That's so great to put it in sort of the macroeconomics of where we are right now and the opportunities that are present with AI. Let's drill down into some of the use cases. So what are the primary use cases for AI within Verizon's consumer business?
The first one for us is we have a very large frontline sales team and a service team. Hundreds of thousands of people serving some of the best customers on earth. And they have a fair amount they have to carry in their head. What plans they have, what plans they're going to go to, how to transition, what are the systems. There's a lot of cognitive load in their head. My first mission is to reduce the cognitive load for our frontline teams. I want them to not worry about it. Don't have to remember a thing. Connect with the customer, listen to the customer, empathize with the customer, maybe even sell something to the customer, but don't worry about carrying the cognitive load. We think AI can help with that in a very scaled manner. So I think that's probably the first and most important use case. We use that with our sales team, our service team, even technicians who go out in the field, talk to customers. I don't want them to worry about every single equipment, port, which connection goes where. Don't worry about it. Listen to the customer, serve them. We'll take care of all of this in the back end, and AI is there to help.
So this is wonderful. So you're really acting in almost a sort of in partnership with the frontline employees on sales and other consumer-facing communications so that they're getting the information, the technical information they need, but they're able to deepen the human connection. Very interesting. So let's kind of pivot to the customer a little bit here too. How does AI help, in your view, with personalization and enhancing that customer experience?
Dominique, we have one of the most advanced personalization engines in the world today. For every customer, we track 1,500 different data points for the customer, and we do it in a privacy-safe manner. We don't sell this data to third parties. We keep it for ourselves, mostly to help the customer. And for each customer, we're able to make 130 different predictions about them. Where they're going to shop, when they're going to disconnect, when they're going to use our service. So we want you to be a segment of one. Historically growing up, When you went to business school, they used to have these big courses around marketing segmentation. Your segment, in my case, I may be an Indian American who's gone to college with two pesky kids. I fit a segment. I don't have to worry about all of that because now we're able to segment every single customer on an individual basis. For us, that's 72 million every single month. So we have a segmentation of one, and then you can change copy. So, for example, the email, Dominic, you get and I get are different. The app looks different. The things that show up on the app look different. The copy is different. The text is different. The pictures are different. And soon the videos will also be different. So we are able to take personalization at the extreme level to make it happen. And we couldn't do this manually. I mean, just imagine we have 72 million customers and then everyone wants to do their own thing. And the math collapses very quickly. But with Gen AI, we're able to put that into a machine. It's called Scriptify. It's a Verizon tool that we have that customizes things for customers. And that's just one. We do personalization across the journey. When we go to a website, what you see and what I see is going to be very different based on, where we came from, what sites we serve, but more importantly, our preferences. Like I like more smaller handsets because that's what I've bought over the last 3 or 4. And then I'll just show you the smaller handsets versus the large ones that my kids sometimes want.
This is fascinating, and it sounds great because it's a way to really, like you talked about, furthering the human connection by actually delivering services and products that are going to be the consumer will be most amenable to receiving. So this is really a smart way of handling that. So we talked about all the wonderful things in the personalization. What have you seen? I mean, you talk about 72 million customers and a huge sales force. What challenges or hurdles have you faced in terms of deploying AI across such a large consumer business as you do lead?
One of the interesting takeaways for me has been customer adoption has been the easy part. Because at the end of the day, the customers have a better experience. They are served up products and services they want or are interested in, and they don't have to wade through a million other things. So customers actually like it a lot more. TikTok is a great example. It's doing incredibly well. We know from our consumer connections report that average customer spends an hour and 42 minutes on it, but they love the experience because it's created by AI in terms of what we're going to watch next, what are going to be served up. So customers are very comfortable with AI broadly. Where we have to be careful is it cannot be creepy. We have to be very careful of that. Privacy is super important for us. We collect a lot of data. We don't sell data. There is no third party. We don't sell to third party. That's not the business we are in. So for us, consumer adoption has been the easy part for us. Where we've had challenges is some of the underlying data. I mean, we have 29,000 different data sources within our company. That's not a typo. 29,000 different data sources within the company. Different sources, different schema, different ways of measurement. So how do you bring that together, correlate them, put them in a common data pool? And at the scale, I mean, we are creating petabytes of bytes of data every single day. How do you do that on a basis? So that's been the work around data engineering, data governance for us to get there. And the third one is what is relevant to the customer, and that is a little bit of hit and miss, I will admit. And so we're learning our way on what customers like and what they don't like. We make mistakes, we take them down very quickly, and then we put up new ones and we see where they work. So we test and learn every day.
It's exciting because I think in many respects, the whole ecosystem is we're really sort of building the plane as we innovate, if you will. And so adjustments we have to actually try to actually get to the point where we can excel and scale on all fronts. So I'm excited for what you're doing. You talked about data privacy, and I just want to touch on that topic of governance. So how do you, as the CEO of the consumer business, sort of cultivate and set the tone for an organizational culture of responsible AI, privacy forward, from ideation through the deployment phases?
Look, at the foundational level for us, privacy is super important to us. People trust us with some of their most personal, intimate data. They just do because we operate the internet, we operate your phones, so we know a lot. People trust us, and that's not something I'm going to give up. That trust is so important for us. No amount of money, no amount of upside is going to make us give up some of that. So we don't sell data. That's the foundation of it. So if you want, someone comes to us and says, hey, sell us this data for this, answer is absolutely no. A lot of other companies do it. In fact, a lot of my competitors do it. They have businesses that serve up ads and other things that based on their own data stream. We don't do that. That gives customers a lot of confidence in us.
What you just said there about trust is so important. Some of the research I've done, and there's some great research done by Forbes and also Edelman PR and many others that have focused on the correlation between trust and revenue and growth. And they found that companies that are trusted are 400% more successful, more profitable than the others. So you're on the right path here from what I can see from the economic research.
No, it is important. And also customers trust us with their data. When they call up Verizon and they get a phone or a home internet from us, I do not want them worrying about, will this data be shared? So I think that's the foundation piece for us. The second thing is the human in the loop. Given where AI is, where the AI models are, we like to put a human in the loop wherever possible. There has to be some check on what goes out. Over a period of time, we'll get more comfortable. Our models will get tighter. We'll be able to know how much hallucination and drifting happens. But right now, we feel really comfortable about putting a human in the loop. And it's part of the piece. The third is we have a very strong AI governance process. Every single thing we do with AI, and we do hundreds of projects with AI on a given basis, we run it through a group. It's made up of our marketing team, our revenue teams, lawyers, lots of them, experts on data governance, and then they decide whether this makes a check. Can it be audited? Can you document what's going on there? Because you never want a situation where the AI says something and it cannot be documented or it cannot be recreated. That is not good for a company like ours. So we have a lot of checks and balances in place. But Dominic, I have a very clear vision. I want to be the world's best AI applied company.
That's great. I just love to hear that said from the top as a leader. It's interesting you should talk about model drift because that's an area that I've been thinking a lot about, especially in the context of some of the regulatory frameworks that are out there and the state of the generative AI technology, where sometimes the drifting can delight us in terms of finding new takes on issues and making it amazing. But I think about, for example, a totally different company in the UK that had a situation just in January where the CEO woke up to the name of the company trending on X, formerly Twitter, as the chatbot started swearing at customers, complaining that the company was the worst logistics company in the world, and then complaining that the company had let go the real customer service humans in lieu of the quote unquote useless chatbot. And I felt for that CEO when I saw this taking place because there was an AI governance team and there were redundancies. And this was a company and a CEO who really cared about her business. But, 2.2 million views later on X and coverage in the BBC, disastrous fiasco, chatbot, etc. So this idea of mastering that with humans in the loop. Talk to us a little bit more about steps that you have found, tips effective for humans in the loop on the output side.
Well, look, I think this first important step for us when you put humans in the loop is you have to understand the architecture of your solution. There are some models that drift more, there's some models that hallucinate more. I need to know that early in the process. You cannot put models that hallucinate and drift in front of customers. That's why we have this RAG architecture, which is very important because it takes results from a learning model, checks it against data that's available today, and then spits out results. So it slows things down a little bit, a little more expensive, but it prevents the drift in the models from happening. I think that's very important. And this is why taking things off the shelf and immediately deploying it is very difficult. We have one of the largest, probably the world's largest conversational AI platform in deployment today. We've got years and years of experience in terms of what it can do. And we have to hold back because it can do a lot more, but we worry about drift and exaggeration. So we have to be careful to pulling that. But that's why having technical experts on the governance is going to be important. You cannot run this with business folks and lawyers all the time. you got to get the nerds in there sometimes, to manage. And I can say that because I'm one of them. So you got to get the nerds in, put them in and tell them what can the model do that's going to hurt you.
Absolutely. And I think, just you're talking about something very important, which I was going to touch on as far as governance, because it sounds like you've got the data scientists, the nerds, if you will, the lawyers, the marketing team, the CEO involved. And that if you could talk to the audience about the importance of a cross-disciplinary team that you identified and how that has worked for you.
I think many companies have gone down the route of an AI czar or a czarina, and it's very difficult. It happens with any new technology. There are all these chief blockchain officers, chief metaverse officers. I'm sure that you're going to see the trend of chief AI officers. It's the worst thing in the world to do, because what happens is when you do that, the folks who deploy these technologies are very far removed from the line operators who've dealt with it for the last 15, 20 years. So you want your innovation in AI happening at the line, at the function that actually does the work, not another group doing that. And by doing that, you tend to get a cross-disciplinary thing because those guys do it anyway. If you're a marketing manager today, you by definition work with legal, finance, comms, PR. But if you put a separate group that is only responsible for AI, they're not going to know who else to loop into the process. So I like to keep all our AI innovation really close to the front line.
This is so fascinating because I was just recently last month at an AI governance meeting at the International Association of Privacy Professionals, and they talked about the importance of having trained professionals that have had experience, on the front lines with AI, and then continuing to develop the talent pool, and how, along those lines, looking ahead, looking to the future. How are you thinking about sort of cultivating that next generation of frontline folks that will be able to carry what you're innovating now into the future and those learnings?
Look, talent's always a hot commodity. AI talent's one of the hottest right now. I mean, we should all put prompt engineer on our resumes right now. We will be the hottest people in town. But like in my case, that's not the case. But look, a talent continues to be very important. So for us, we have two pools. We have large pools of global talent to do this. Some of our more interesting work in cutting edge AI is actually happening in India for us, where we have some of our centers there. And two is we work with partners who are best in class. We're open about this. We work with Google. We're one of their largest customers on the AI side, and we are the cutting edge of what they do. So you have to bring in pools of labor that are cuts across geographies, companies to get this done. The other piece is training our current teams to ensure that they get the value of AI, because they're the ones who do the work every day. The technician, the call center manager, the store manager, the marketing manager, the digital manager. So training on what capabilities Gen AI has is a broad education that every company needs to do, because people will be aware of how it can impact their lives and their function. So I think we just got to let people run and do their course.
I like this because I literally was just yesterday at Carnegie Mellon University with the Block Center, and as they were, analyzing, AI in connection with the future of work, and this is the first I've heard of actually training existing employees about how to use AI and how to deploy it for their benefit. Let me ask you just a follow on. Do you find that there is any fear on the employee side of AI, and does the training about how AI can help them and assist them in their jobs help dissipate some of that?
Look, I think first is, there's a lot of talk about, are people going to lose their jobs? And let me give you an interesting example. By education, I'm an accountant. 20, 30 years ago, when VisiCalc, which was the first real kind of spreadsheet before the Excel came in, and everyone thought accountants are going to lose their jobs. There are going to be no bookkeepers. There are going to be no accountants. At that time, there were around 350,000 bookkeepers/accountants in the country. Today, there are 1.4 million of them. They've gone up 3 or 4x despite all the automation. So there is always a fear that automation is going to take jobs. It's going to be a shift of skills. In a call center, some of the basic work is going to go away, and work's going to move more upstream in upselling, solving deeper technical problems. Same with our sales teams as well. So there's going to be a shift in skill that's going to be needed. people are going to have to continue to upskill. That's my biggest worry in this is they spend all their time worrying about what AI is going to do and then not spend enough time on upskilling themselves to get there. So it's important upon managers like myself to ensure that people upskill. But I think broadly people like trying new technologies. People like change, and like trying new things. AI is no different. And the fact that AI is so prevalent everywhere else, you can't switch on TV or read a newspaper without talking about it. So there's always a little bit of curiosity. I just finished my monthly Ask Me Anything. There were so many questions on AI from my teams. How are we using it? Are there more opportunities to use this? So it's very important to educate, to demystify this thing, and ensure where you need to reskill your people.
Well, this is a great example, and we have a large CEO and board member audience, and I love this tip of, what you said here about Ask Me Anything and bringing the teams across the enterprise together to pose their questions to you as the CEO. That's very important. And I'm not sure how many other CEOs are doing this, and it's such a great idea.
Dominic, it's not always the convenient questions that get asked. But I think, look, part of this is also I see myself as sometimes a multi-generational leader. I'm bridging two generations here. Folks who have just come into the workforce and folks way more senior in tenure than me who've been in the company for a very long time. And it's my role as a CEO to bridge those generations. And part of that is you get questions that are not comfortable. We are going through in our office right now, return to office, how we manage through that, AI, how we deploy it. So I think transparency is very important. You have to communicate a lot. And you also got to communicate with less jargons. I have a strong belief that corporate communications is the most ununderstandable thing because people use so much jargon and complicate pretty simple messages. So talk in English and the world will be happy. So it's a lesson we're all learning together and we are growing together.
And recently, I did my second annual Digital Trust Summit at Brown University with about 184 CEOs and board members. And there was a really interesting observation for one of the Fortune 100 CEOs that the technology is there, but what we're really dealing with here is a question of leadership. And so how to actually deploy the technology and how to actually effectuate will depend a lot upon the leadership, is what this one CEO said. What's your thought about that?
Dominic, he or she has summed it up really well because AI and Gen AI is an interesting technology in the sense that this is the largest gap between what the technology can do and how it's deployed today. Because if you see what's happening, it's unbelievable the progress. They're making progress in weeks, months. But if you see actual scale deployments, it's pretty far behind. So there's a huge gap. So the technology is there. There is no two ways about it. The question is, how do you adapt it to your company? I think a lot of the work is going to have to be in verticalizing AI models. A lot of the models that generate, like ChatGPT and Cloud, Gemini, are very broad based models. My kids may be happy doing homework out of it, which I know sometimes they do it. But I don't think it's ready for production work without a lot more verticalization, either verticalization or functionalization. You need a audience cloud, you need a marketing one, you need a churn prediction model. So there's a lot of work in doing that. That's why I don't think technology is the real issue. The real issue is how do you take it, deploy it, and then where do you deploy it? Because you could have hundreds of smaller use cases that you run. So you want to put your money on 3 or 4 big areas and get it right. So this is all about leadership. And I'm so lucky that it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. I feel like I'm in the internet in 2000 right now. You have yahoo.com and you have exciteathome.com, and I'm just looking and I can see anything I want to in the world.
Well, it's exactly that. And we are at such a pivotal moment in history. And I agree with you. It's exciting to be at this point where we can be involved in shaping what the generations to come will be working with. So the things that we set into place are so important. And I love what you're talking about in terms of that cross-disciplinary team and the leader sort of taking the team through it. You touched on one thing in terms of governance that I wanted to drill down on. How do you ensure, from your standpoint, that a responsible deployment is taking place? Because, as you said, the focus is really on how it's deployed, not pulled off the shelf.
It's a very difficult question to answer. The way AI models are designed, they're not predictable. They are probabilistic. They're not deterministic. And when things are probabilistic and not deterministic, it's a big problem because there is always a small chance it's going to say stuff it shouldn't. And you should be aware that you're dealing with very probabilistic environment. Then you have to realize what type of controls you put in self to manage those trade-offs. For example, if I'm on ChatGPT and I'm just doing general search about cricket scores or football scores or history about cricketers and footballers and things like that, I'm fine. I'll get a few facts wrong. Nothing's going to happen. My son will win a bet. That's about it. But when you're in a production environment, the costs are much more expensive. So being very clear, back to the drift conversation, how much something can drift, what are the trade-offs on that is very important. You're never going to be able to get to zero. That's just not how things work. So this is about risk management. The second is there are a few core red areas the models can never cross. And you need to know what those red areas are. It could be touching politically sensitive topics, it could be working against some diversity rules, things like that. There are 4 or 5 things that you have to hard code into your model saying, I don't care what the drift is, you will never cross these 4 or 5 barriers to do that. So I think those two probably are the biggest. And the third one is you got to test a lot. You got to test and learn, test and learn. You will always find things. We are in the middle of deploying a couple of large AI models. We typically start deploying with a couple of hundred people, and then we wait for a couple of months and we collect every piece of data, and then we scale it out to thousands. So that first deployment is pretty important.
Okay, so just going into what you talked about here, continuous testing, having certain things sort of a no-fly zone, and the things that you were just saying intuitively. I mean, falling back and pivoting to my lawyer hat are so synergistic with what I'm seeing in the trustworthy legal AI frameworks, not only in the EU AI Act, but in the 97 countries, 6 continents that have draft legislation out there. And they talk about the importance for continuous testing, monitoring, and auditing of AI, as you said. And they also talk about specific guardrails that they have deemed to be most important, things that you talked about: IP, bias, it's another area, accuracy, as you mentioned, especially when you're dealing directly with your business partners and your consumers. So it's great to see that alignment between the law and where the business leaders are seeing things, and of course that's important because the laws won't go into effect for another couple of years.
Yeah, and look, we're going to have to look. Laws are evolving. We also don't know how far the technology can progress. So you will likely be in a scenario where, by the time in the next couple of years, technology has gotten so ahead of what the laws intended it for it to be. So this is going to be a cat and mouse game. I don't know who the cat is, who the mouse is, but it's going to continue chasing each other, the regulation and the technology. But at some point, they will align on it. But right now, look, also every company has its own core value system.
Exactly.
I think we're going to have to rely on our value system. Never screw the customer, never lie, which is code for drift, never do things that violate basic, principles of diversity and equality, and never put a customer in harm's way. So these are principles every company can agree. I don't need a law. I don't need a 97-page executive order to tell me that. I know it. I'm going to run my business exactly that way. So every company has their own core values, and they're going to have to bring it to work at AI too.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. When I talk to companies and clients, I often advise businesses, look, there is a company culture, a risk tolerance, a DNA, if you will. The main thing to remember is to communicate that to the AI. And, just going back to that one example, and there are many others where things that are not suitable for the customers, like, cursing or whatever the situation, or, recommending the wrong thing, whatever it is, there's usually someone in the company that's already in charge of dealing with the training of customer service people, or whatever the use case is. There's someone who already knows the DNA of the company and the rules of the road. And like you said, then making sure that gets embedded in the AI itself in terms of code so that AI can recognize it.
That is a little bit of the difference, because typically culture has been around people. What do people say? How do they deal with customers? How do they deal with each other? Now, culture is about AI as well. How do you take your culture and embed it deeper and deeper into your AI systems? And there is no rule book for that. There is no culture module that you can buy off an AI vendor to do that piece. It is hard work around what you can tolerate and what you cannot and should not tolerate to do that. And I think companies are going to learn, many of them, the hard way on how this happens. That's why we've gotten a little early. We scaled it at levels, but every single day, that's what we worry about: is my culture being reflected in how the AI systems integrate and talk to my customers and other business partners? The tone of the language, the way they answer questions. When they don't know something, how do they answer it? When they say something, will they deliver on the promise? That's how my employees work. I need all my AI systems to behave exactly the same way. So this is quite personal to us as Verizon.
This advice that you're providing from Verizon and this personal approach, I think, is so important for our CEO audience to listen to, because the temptation might be there to delegate the cultural value question and sort of delegate that to the chief AI officer or the IT and so forth. But letting your team know that this is important, how do you communicate that? Because I think a lot of CEOs want to know, how do they do that without micromanaging their team, but at least setting the tone for what is expected?
It's an interesting change management exercise because there are many companies who are established, who've been doing business for 50, 60, 100 years, and feel they're not being edgy enough. So they go the other way on AI and they start deploying AIs in very edgy ways. That's a situation. On the other hand, you have companies who are relatively new, their culture is developing, who tend to be really conservative about AI. So I think matching the tone of your company with your AI posture is going to be very important to do that piece. And so for us, it comes back to a value system. We have a value system, we call it the Verizon Credo. I have 4 pillars, things like integrity and kindness, bias to action, a winning mindset, and shared success. Every single day I talk about them. I try and exhibit behavior. My leadership team exhibits behavior. We award and reward people based on that. And I expect people to take this into the AI systems when they do that piece as well. And just because an AI system doesn't have an employee ID and a badge, it doesn't mean they're not reflective of who our company is. So AI is an extension of our personality. When you get on Verizon.com and go to our chat function, we probably do 60, 70 million chats every year. You're talking to a Verizon person. It's just not a he or a she, it's a AI system, but my culture is going to come through in that system. So you're going to have to ensure that people understand, the designers across system understand what your culture values are and how much are you willing to be edgy on top of it.
And this is so important. What you're talking about here is culture and values and leadership and communication, and making sure that I love the idea of, even though the AI doesn't have an employee badge and a card, that they're still part of the company's team. And it's so important to for everyone to be mindful of that as we move forward. Legislation and regulation, as you said, is often years behind technology. Do you see your other leaders outside of Verizon, other CEOs, other board members interested in the kind of proactive culture insertion that you talked about?
Definitely, yes. Look, what I do see is we are a little ahead of the curve in deployment. So sometimes we end up sharing our best practices with what we can do around AI with some of our partners to do that piece. But look, on the topic of regulation, as I said, it's a cat and mouse game at some level. Sometimes the legislation is ahead of the technology. Sometimes the technology is ahead of the legislation. Over a period of time, they too tend to find their water levels around this. But if something doesn't make sense for the company, it doesn't matter whether the laws say you to do it or not. You have to be true to your culture. It goes back to the earlier conversation. It has to be true to your culture. Don't want to do things you would not do otherwise. Whether it's a bias, it's some of the issues we discussed. It's swear words, it's bias, it's tone of communication. As I said, I don't need an 80, 90 page executive order to tell me those things. I kind of know it myself to do that.
Someone said something very similar recently, talking to another tech company senior leader, and they said the same thing about common sense. Like, we don't want to move quicker than the time it takes to exercise common sense here. If something smells different than your culture, that's probably a time to take a step back and think, does this really work for us, no matter what's in the headlines? And so I love this idea of, the second time I've heard it, of just sort of not being tethered to the details of what's in hundreds of, the executive order is 97 pages, but oh my gosh, I think the EU AI Act is like 300 pages long, et cetera, so forth. But a lot of this comes down to common sense. How would you want to treat your partners? How would you want to treat your customers? How do you want to treat your internal team? And so turning to that lens that way, I think is great advice. Let me ask you, if you had a crystal ball, and I know last year I heard AI was like a third grader, and then this year at our conference, we heard AI's already in college. So 5 years from now, it's going to be hard to project, I'm sure. But if you had to look ahead, where do you think AI will take us, and what is the most value added area that you think AI will take us? And then what role do you think Verizon will play in that journey?
Look, AI engines are going to get faster. As they put more compute against the problem, the parameters are going to get bigger, the models are going to get bigger, they're going to take in more data sources, they're going to get smarter. I don't know whether, it's in 5 years, it's going to be a MIT grad, it's going to be a high schooler. I don't know, but I don't think it even matters to some extent. It's going to get smarter. It's going to do a lot more things for us. This concept of AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, it requires a conscience. I'm not sure AIs will ever have conscience because it's such a programmatic piece. So there will be some limitations, which is why having guardrails is always going to be important. And even if it does have conscience, you want to control the conscience. You don't want to let the machine run its course to do that. So for us, we think there are huge upsides in how we do customer service, how we deploy our networks, and then soon products and technologies that have AI deeply embedded in our systems. So we see a lot of upside for ourselves. As I said, this is the only real deflationary environment we have to play with over the next 20 years of our life, because most of the other things have been tapped out. Offshoring for the large part has been tapped out. Moore's law has kind of worked its way through the back end of its life. So we need AI to add more productivity. It's a country thing, and I think for America broadly, this is something we are leading in, what we do best. So this is a chance for us to take a lead again. I mean, think about it. The last 30 years, America has outpaced every other continent, every other economy in growing because of the internet and because of some of the technologies we have. We're going to do it all over again. This is act 2 of that, just going to play out in the AI space for us. Competition is going to be severe, from the Chinese, from the Indians, from the Europeans, but always US has an edge in this. And I feel Verizon is very lucky to operate here right now because we have access to some of the best technologies and people in deploying this.
Well, this is so exciting. And I think this combination of leveraging innovation, technology, and also humans controlling AI, not the other way around, as you articulated, with that in our future, we are off to a great start. So thank you so much, Sampath, for this important conversation and illuminating one about CEO leadership in this space.
Thanks so much. And maybe AI is going to be as smart as an MIT grad in a couple of years. Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been Trust with Dominique Shelton Leipzig. If you want to future-proof your business's investments in data and AI by adopting data leadership in privacy, security, and trusted AI legal frameworks, go to DominiqueSheltonLeipzig.com. Trust, responsible AI, innovation, and data leadership is a production of Forbes Books.